Hello, kia ora, and welcome to the Creative Matters podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with artists from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm your host, Mandy Jakic. Auckland-based artist James Emery has always had a keen interest in art and art history, particularly New Zealand art from the 1950s and 60s, and the American abstract expressionists. Majoring in art history at Auckland Uni, James worked within the art industry for many years before developing his own practice only 2 years ago. This month he celebrates his first solo show at the Grey Place in Grey Lynn, Auckland, which opens next week on March the 26th, 2024. This chat was so motivating and interesting for me and honestly made me feel like I needed to get back to my brushes and get painting again. We talk about New Zealand art and artists and discover a mutual admiration for a number of abstract artists. James talks about how his natural eye for good aesthetics influenced his early career buying and selling art, decorative arts, and jewellery. We discuss how James started his painting practice after years of observing, researching, and thinking, how paint and process drives him, how he strives to create a new approach or technique in painting that could possibly leave some kind of legacy, and how he is never short of ideas. James talks about how circuit boards as objects and metaphors first inspired him to create his series Incommunicado, and we discuss his latest series for his upcoming solo show, Tension and Attitude, and he shares his innovative painting process, tools and techniques. Good morning, James.
Good morning.
How are you?
Very good, thanks, yeah.
Good. It's lovely to see you again. We saw each other, we first met at Elliot Love's opening at Parnell's
Gallery.
That's
right, correct. Yeah, that was a great exhibition. And it was nice to see you because I've heard you on these podcasts, but being able to actually see you in person was really nice, yeah.
See the real life person. Somebody told me, one guest told me that I was much older than they expected.
Really? Oh, gosh, no way.
Which is like, I wasn't sure if that was
bizarre.
a compliment or not.
Take it as a compliment, but it sounds weird.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Anyway, moving on. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for coming all the way out to Muriwai.
Thanks. It's a beautiful place, great location, and you're doing amazing things on the house too.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, there's lots of action on the house, so I have to report the final photos at some point. So, James, I think we've got a lot in common. The more I read about you, the more I thought, this guy likes the same kind of things that I like. As far as artists go. So you are inspired, you love Gretchen Albrecht.
Yes.
And Mark Rothko, and that's kind of where I started too with those two. And
yes. Turns out I like colour-filled artists.
Yeah, which I do
and abstract
too.
expressionists, That's my two main go-tos, I think. That's right.
So it's going to be really nice to talk to you about sort of how you've taken their work and how you've developed your own practice. So it's an interesting story, I think, for you with, it's only really been the last couple of years that you have developed your art practice and maybe called yourself an artist.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
At one point in time, I didn't think I would ever actually do art. I was interested in art as in looking at artists and artists' work, and I did art history as a degree, obviously, way back. But it's interesting being on the other side and actually doing the art. It's a different kind of thing, and for me, I find it quite meditative. So that's something. A couple of years ago, I actually had shingles, so it was quite a painful experience. And as I was recovering from that, that's when I started to pick up a brush and just do it for those meditative kind of reasons, just to do something as a hobby, something completely different, and found I really took to it like a duck to water, actually, and so it's been great.
That's so great, and it's such an inspiring story that you're 48 years old, and,
correct.
And you have two young children, aged 4 and 6. So you're doing well to even have the headspace to be making.
Yeah, it's not enough time in the day, but I make it work somehow.
I bet. So can we go all the way back to when you were young?
Yes.
And tell us where you were born.
So I was born in Auckland. So I kind of grew up around the St Heliers, Glendowie area. My father bought a house maybe when I was about 5 years old, Waitaki Bay, which is originally Glen Innes. So it's a nice part of Glen Innes. We had an outlook over the estuary. That's where I was born. Yeah.
And were you the kind of child who was wanting to get creative?
I didn't especially think so, but I kind of had this weird eye for aesthetics, and I was interested in history from as long as I can remember, and things that were old I found quite fascinating. So I sort of later on sort of got more into buying and selling sort of decorative arts, a bit of art as well, and made it a bit of a business. And so I haven't always had an interest in art, it seems like. But the first time I really think I saw art and got inspired was probably when I was maybe 8 or 10 years old, and I was going through an encyclopedia we had at home, and it was days before the internet, long before the internet, and so I was flicking through the art section, and there was this image. And before this, I'd only seen things like Mona Lisa, figurative kind of pieces, standard sort of art. But then I saw this work by Adolf Gottlieb called Thrust, and it was a very expressive kind of work. And I obviously was old enough to know what thrust meant and the force of thrust, and to me, it explained it perfectly in this work. And it had the bottom, this splatter of black paint with this sort of floating red orb, and at one point in time they might have been connected, and it's like the red orb sort of blasted off and left a splatter of black behind it, and you could really feel that force. And I thought that was just a brilliant painting. So that's my early recollection that sort of stayed with me for since then. One of the artists that I really was also kind of inspired by a little bit in terms of just the genius of their work was Jan van Eyck. As a kid, I remember seeing that Arnolfini marriage portrait, and I didn't realize even how small it was back then, but I think I had this, I really liked realism as well in art. So not just abstract expressionism or abstract works, but really well done realism to that level where even though it's painted in the 1400s, it was just looked like it had been painted yesterday. And I think because I have this interest in history, that kind of gelled as well, where you could see, everything in the house that they used to wear, that they used to use in the house, and everything was symbolic in that painting as well, as it would have been back in those days, the religious symbolism. And so, that's another painting that left an impression from quite a young age when I first saw it in a book, and so brilliantly painted.
And probably informed your interest in history.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, things that people used. When I used to, I had this interest in old things, it was that part of it was just how it's made it through time to be here, and what's the history of that piece, who's used it in the past, and that sort of thing. So I think that's where I got that interest in antiques and things at some point. My grandmother was actually kind of like a second mother to me, really. We grew up with her when I was young in the same house. So she kind of brought me up as well as my mum. My mum's great, of course, but she was like a second mother, my grandmother. And so when I was about 12, 13, she on the weekends would do these art classes, as older ladies do when they're retired. Sometimes they do these kind of, art classes, and she was painting landscapes. And she said to me one time, "Do you want to have a go?" And it's quite amazing, the smell of the oils, and she's using oil paint and the terps and that sort of thing. So it has quite an attractive smell to it, and it's quite different. And so I thought, that sounds fun. So I had a go at doing a seascape, I remember, and I'd chosen this scene from a book or something, like a photograph, and started painting that, and found I could mix colors really well somehow. So it ended up turning out quite a good painting. And I was, it was like sunset, and I could get the reflection of the sunset in the foam and the water. And we framed it, and one of her clients, because she was a hairdresser by trade, so she worked at home as well doing hairdressing, and one of her clients, because she hung it in the kind of close to the salon, and as one of her clients was walking through, they wanted to buy it. It was that good.
Really?
And there was no price or anything on it, and we didn't know what to ask for it, but I didn't really want to sell it, so I think I put something like, I said, oh, if she wants to buy it, it'd be like $200. So she didn't buy it. But I don't know what happened to that in the end. But I was
what a shame you don't have it.
I don't have it, no. So that was kind of my introduction to actually painting, I think, was back then.
And once again, another wonderful influence from a grandparent.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Which makes me as a grandmother, very mindful of the things that I do with my 2 grandsons.
Yeah, I think so. It's really, it can be pretty powerful. And my grandfather was actually a potter by trade, so he not in decorative pottery, but he was like an industrial potter, so he would make lamp bases. So I used to actually help him as well down there in his basement, and he used to live down there. Had his pipe, and he'd be listening to classical music as he'd be doing this all day, so it was it's quite a peaceful kind of place to be for him.
And that's probably had more influence than you realise.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thinking back, yeah.
I do like to ask guests about their time at high school and if they discovered art, and did they have any early sort of promise in the visual arts from that time. So how was high school for you in the art department?
In the art department was one of my favourite departments, actually. I wasn't big on maths and science and things like that, really. I was better at English, but I know art was the other thing I used to like doing. And it felt like a bit of a break away from everything else at school. And I didn't really follow the curriculum, to be honest. I had this really nice relationship with the platonic relationship with the art teacher. Her name was Mrs. McClellan, and I kind of just really got on side with her, and was so in the end she kind of let me do pretty much what I wanted in terms of art, and I used to be painting cars most of the time.
Really?
So yeah, that was about it. But no feelings of, oh geez, I should maybe do art as a career or anything like that. It was just kind of more of a fun thing for me back then.
And then you chose art history at university.
Yeah. Well, I actually left school halfway through sixth form. I kind of had enough of school by then, and I wanted to be a motor mechanic of all things. And so I had this, I was sort of always playing around with my own cars, working on them and things when I was young. And so I went off to Manukau Polytech, and got an apprenticeship after that at a vintage MG. It was called the MG shop out in New Lynn. And that was going okay, but I kind of felt like it was a cold, sort of oily place to work. I'm thinking, geez, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. It's pretty hardcore. And I ended up trying to remove a drum, a brake drum one time with a screwdriver, and it slipped on the grease and went straight into my eye.
Oh, no.
So I was like millimeters away from being blinded, and got through it okay. Vision wasn't impaired. But after that, myself and the owner of the garage suggested I probably shouldn't do any more of that.
Really?
So I left and went into kind of just retail sort of work for a few years, I think. Maybe 3-4 years in the end, just thinking I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I ended up buying like a franchise. I'd saved some money, bought a franchise, thought maybe that's key, like a service franchise. And but then I found that wasn't great, and they were kind of, all I was doing was paying royalties every week, and they were not giving me as much work as they should, and that sort of thing. And I found that quite difficult. So I ended up thinking, well, maybe I'll go to university and get a Bachelor of Business degree, and I can start my own business of some sort properly. And that was my plan. So I went to AUT in the city, and I hated it because it felt too much like a classroom setup. And I had seen and heard about Auckland Uni over the road being a lot more open, and you can kind of do your own thing. You're on your own time a lot more. So you have to be self-motivated, obviously, but you don't have that same strict classroom set up. You're going to different lecture halls and things, So I thought maybe that's the ticket, but because I hadn't finished school properly, I could only do a BA as an adult student. So I was 25 when I went to Auckland Uni, and so I ended up doing BA papers and gravitating. Obviously, I was interested in history already, so that was fun, and sociology, but also I found art history was really interesting. So I went into art history thinking, well, what do I like? I like 19th century kind of art predominantly, like the Impressionists, and Renoir and Monet and those sort of guys, and Cézanne, obviously, and then I got an introduction to New Zealand art through that as well, and I found that even more captivating. So I got really interested in New Zealand art and felt like the 1960s sort of period, 70s was kind of, I found the most interesting. Of course, it was kind of the heights of everything changing in New Zealand art scene. And we had great lecturers as well. Francis Pound was my favorite, and dressed really dapper. He had these amazing shoes on, Italian shoes, crocodile sort of shoes. He's a really interesting guy. And he would give these really good lectures, and you could see he was passionate about what he was lecturing about. And so he would give these lectures about, I think his favorite artists were Richard Colleen and Gordon Walters, I remember. So he obviously liked those geometric abstraction, I think, was really his thing too, which is what I sort of gravitated to and interested in. And so yeah, I think through his lectures I got a lot more interest in New Zealand art from that. Yeah.
And there's something about New Zealand art, it's something that's always been of interest to me as well. And the history of New Zealand art, even though it's very short, obviously, but there is something fascinating. What do you think fascinates you about it?
I think we're trying to find ourselves as a country still. It's so young, and the artists in New Zealand seem to kind of capture some of New Zealand in a really interesting way. And I wasn't particularly proud of being a New Zealander, to be honest. When I was young, I always used to think, oh, it's kind of boring, I'd rather be overseas living, but finding out about New Zealand art really gave me that sort of, it made me more proud to be a Kiwi in a weird way, just through New Zealand art. I don't know how. Before I was painting or anything like that, just the history of New Zealand art I found fascinating, and really got into the lives of these artists. And at those times as well, there wasn't much of a market in New Zealand art in the 60s and 70s. It was kind of very new to artists being able to do it even full time. It was kind of rare, even for the bigger artists. And yeah, Peter McCleavey was really one of those guys that pushed New Zealand art through. He started out in the 60s, I think, from his parents' house, and got a collection of artists together and started exhibiting their works. And he obviously had a good eye. And so, yeah, I think he was instrumental in kind of pushing that New Zealand interest in New Zealand art forward.
Yeah. And there have been a lot of people sort of over the last 60 years probably, who have had such a huge influence on artists and the artist community in New Zealand. People like Ron Brownson, who sadly we lost last year. He was so involved in so many different artist communities, and was such a huge supporter of what people were doing, what New Zealanders were doing in the art world.
Yeah, and some of these artists, I know Ian Scott was one, I think, Ralph Hotry, they went overseas and looked at some of the artists overseas and were inspired by their works, and you can see some similarities in some of their works actually with some of those overseas artists, American predominantly.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
And it's such a small world. It's so, especially then, everyone seemed so connected.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't the number of people making art as a career. No. And you had Colin McCann, obviously, was this shining light in that scene. But I think he struggled for quite a long time. He worked at the art gallery in the 50s as a job, I think, didn't he? Yeah, he started as a janitor.
Yeah. And I didn't even understand any of his work until I got to uni, and then I started to appreciate it a lot more. How his mind worked and how he's sort of bringing sort of a religious kind of base to the land, New Zealand as a land and that sort of thing was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and he lived out here actually at Muriwai.
Yes, that's right.
Probably know.
In the 70s, yeah.
Yeah.
He did some amazing paintings, black and white sort of paintings. I remember in that period. Jump is one of my favourite little paintings he did, actually.
Yeah.
The Gannet colonies and things like that. And Jet Away. Yeah.
Yeah, they're so great. Yeah,
amazing.
I love that series.
Yeah, all those charcoal works and
really special. So New Zealand, I mean, I think the art world is growing in New Zealand, and it's almost like we're sort of gaining confidence and sort of growing up slightly.
Yes.
Probably still quite a bit behind the rest of the world, possibly.
Yeah. I feel like we're punched above our weight, though, I have to say, in New Zealand. From what I've seen, even in Australia, it doesn't really grab me the same as New Zealand art does. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm a Kiwi, I don't know.
Yeah, what is it? I mean, what is it about New Zealand art that grabs you?
Everybody's got their own unique style, I think as well. So what got me kind of more interested in, and I guess where I started to go with art myself, was the New York school. So that's a good example. In the 1940s, how they had this collection of artists that decided to do all their own sort of versions of abstract expressionism, and Mark Rothko is one of them. He was more colour field, so a little bit later in the 50s he came into his own, but in the 40s and 50s, in the early 50s, you had William de Kooning, Ad Reinhardt, and Jackson Pollock was probably the most famous of that New York school, and with his drip painting. So they had all these unique ways of painting individually, yet it was for a bigger sort of cause or a bigger theme of abstract expressionism. So I find that quite interesting, and
and is it the abstract expressionism from New Zealand artists that you're mostly drawn to now?
I still go back to that kind of New York period, 1940s period, but I can see how I'm interested in New Zealanders that, like Gretchen Albrecht, I definitely drawn on what sort of art she's done in the past. So if you look at her 70s kind of works, which are kind of this very thin wash over linens, and creates like this colour field kind of effect of different colours, I really love that period. And I think she was inspired by Helen Frankenthaler, who was from the sort of 50s period in the States. And yet when I look at Gretchen's work, I like hers a lot more.
Yeah.
I think it's just so impressive the way it just, it's almost these oppressive looking clouds to me. It looks like oppressive sort of clouds in this landscape. And even with her hemisphere works a bit later on, which she's still doing now, the way that she can just move the paint around, and then she adds shapes to that sometimes, which sort of formalizes it a little bit more, which I really love. So I definitely have been inspired by that in my own work.
I can see some of Gretchen in your latest works.
She's amazing.
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
And we were just saying earlier before we started recording that I've just listened to Gretchen's podcast episode with The Good Oil.
I have to listen to that today.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to hear her speaking about, a 60-year-long career in art, which is, incredible. Yeah. She's definitely one of my heroes.
I think from an early age she was told that she had a pretty good knack for painting. Yeah. Yeah. So she was a natural-born artist. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it just takes that one little moment where you think, I can do it. And that can shape your entire life. Yeah. I was actually thinking about it the other day, in my third form at Westgate Girls High School, doing sort of the art that everybody had to do. And I was working with Sue McBride, who a lot of people speak very highly of. And I remember doing these sort of pencil-shaded experiments, really, explorations. It's probably a generous word for them, but and I thought, I quite like that. It feels quite good. And she just completely disregarded it and had her sort of favourite art students who could draw realistically, probably, or had more flair than I did. And right from that moment, I thought, I'm not arty.
Wow, yeah.
I can't do art. And I didn't have a family who really encouraged it or sort of could see the value in it. So that was that. It just kind of went away. And luckily I found it again in my 20s.
And you're going full at it now.
Yeah, I'm making up for lost time, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all it takes, I think. If you had the right person at the right time to sort of push you on a little bit, would definitely have helped. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So you were studying history, getting really excited about New Zealand art.
Yeah.
And then were you thinking to yourself, okay, cool, what am I going to do with this? Or were you thinking, I actually want to start making and responding?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about actually during that period, so this is around 2000, I remember I was so inspired by New Zealand artists that I had this, Ian Scott was one of my favourites. And so I loved his lattice works, they spoke of New Zealand really well. And I thought for the price, they're pretty affordable still for what they are. And so I remember actually going and buying one off, there's a couple that used to go around New Zealand doing antique kind of, it was an antique show. They used to do sort of valuations and go around these different towns. And his name was, I think it was Hamish Walsh. He was advertising an Ian Scott, and it was a giant lattice, like a 2 meters, biggest one, 2 meter by 2 meter. And he was advertising it somewhere, might have been Trading Exchange or something like that. I don't know where I saw it, but anyway, I went and looked at it, and I had to have it. And even though I was renting with my girlfriend at the time in this little apartment in Mount Eden Road, and I had to hire a truck. I bought it for like $12,000, which is pretty much most of what I had. It's just one of those stupid things that I bought, which wasn't stupid, but it was kind of like I didn't have a lot of extra cash after that. But I just wanted to have it on the wall. I just loved it so much, and I really loved his work. And so I managed to get into the apartment and took up the whole wall. And I kept it for about 4 years or so, and then had to sell it on and raise some more money. But that's one thing I just had a flashback and remember that particular thing that I was so inspired by New Zealand art. I had to go and actually get a nice piece of it.
And what a shame that you sold it.
Yeah, I know. I think they're worth quite a lot today too.
Yeah, it definitely would be.
Yeah, it's gone up in value a lot, rightly so.
And it would just be nice to actually own it and have it.
It would. Yeah. So, anyway, after uni, I ended up doing a bit of an OE. I went and worked in Japan teaching English for a year and things like that. And after that, came back to New Zealand and was thinking, I wasn't originally what I wanted to do with the art history degree. I was thinking was become either a dealer or an auctioneer. And the road to getting there for me at that particular point was a bit of a slow one. And I really wanted to make some cash again because I hadn't had much money for a while. So I was putting that on the back burner. So I thought, okay, well, I'll get some sort of business going. And so when I came back from overseas, again, I needed more money in a hurry. So I started this kind of business on TradeMe, which is sort of still getting going around that period. It was kind of 2005. I came back and started importing all this jewelry from the States and China. So it was a mixture of like high-end costume jewelry, CZ rings, as well as fine jewelry, so diamonds and gold and silver rings. And I was also importing watches and even vintage Rolex watches and refurbishing those and selling them on. So I had all these ingenious ways to make money with jewelry, and it was small, so it was easy to import at lower prices and then easy to send out. So me and my girlfriend basically ran that from our home for probably about 4 years or so.
Wow.
And it was one of the biggest jewelry stores on TradeMe actually back then.
Really?
And so that was a lot of fun, but a lot of work. But we made pretty good money from that. And
why do you think, was it purely sort of a business decision and what could be easy to manage, or was it something that you were quite interested in?
I think I had always had this eye for sort of nice things or aesthetics as well in art. And I used to buy and sell decorative arts as well. Used to frequent auctions like Webb's and Cordy's and places like that. And I was quite lucky with some of the things I used to find as well. And along the way, I remember just going through eBay, just looking for things. And if you look long enough, you'll find something. And I'm one of those weirdos that if Antiques Roadshow's playing, I probably know 80% of what's on the Antiques Roadshow.
Really?
I've built up since I was a little kid, interested in old things and history. Just have this weird ability to remember kind of older antiques and that sort of thing. So I remember trawling through eBay, looking at glass vases. I had an interest in glass. That's one format I'd like to do at some point, actually, is glass. And going through and I came across what's called an autumn vase from the 1950s. And I think it was by Per Lutkin, I think was the artist. And it's worth around $4,000 or $5,000. And somebody was selling it for about £30 or so. And so, I don't think I'd do that today, where, I basically just hit the buy now and got it sent over, and I made a pretty good profit on it. But I feel a bit guilty doing that now, to be honest. Really?
Why is that?
I don't know. I feel like it's just, it's something that's quite valuable, and they have missed out on a lot of potential value in that. But when I was younger and I needed the money, it was kind of an easy thing to kind of not worry about so much.
It is that kind of thing where you think, hey,
it's
awesome.
It's like treasure. Sometimes you can find it, and
it gives you an opportunity.
More recently, I suppose, to give you another idea of just, I guess, how I'm looking for things all the time. I was at Webb's, and there was this stained glass window, and it actually had the date on it. It was 1517, so it was the year of the Reformation, actually, that was created. And it had all these different colors, the original LED light as well. And it was, I think I picked it up for a couple of $1,000. And they're super rare anywhere in the world. But why it didn't really sell at the auction, I actually went and bought it after the auction, was because against the wall, there was no color in it. It was so old, and you had to actually hold it in the light, and then you saw all these amazing colors come through, the blues, reds, and yellows. And it was from Switzerland. They often gave those back then as sort of marriage gifts, and so it had made it through all these years with no damage, and I sold that to a collector down in Hamilton, took it down to him actually, and made a pretty good profit on that, just because you can't find them anywhere in the world that easily.
Yeah. So I can understand how that would become quite addictive and
absolutely
quite a passion.
And I've got no time now for that with my art plus kids and work, so yeah, it's a fun kind of hobby kind of thing, though.
Yeah, it's something that can develop again later, probably. Once
I think so.
More
Yeah,
time.
for sure. Yeah.
So when did you give that up, and what happened between then?
Yeah. Right. So
now?
I think things were moving on Trade Me. Things had sort of changed. It became a lot more sellers than I couldn't make the same profit anyway as I could before. So I thought, well, let's try something else. And so I thought, because I bought a franchise years earlier, and it was in carpet cleaning, and so I thought, well, maybe I could do the same sort of thing again, but add some other services that are a bit more niche to that, because there's a lot of carpet cleaners around. So I started a steam cleaning business, and so that's kind of the business I've still got today, and I've got other guys working for me in that business. Usually takes the pressure off, and so I still help out when I need to, of course. Yeah.
And you're still overseeing it, which, I know, is still a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I got stuck in something that I kind of built up, and I don't really need to advertise now, which is nice, but it's sort of... I didn't end up going down the auctioneering kind of route in the end. And I did have this thought at the time, well, I'd like to be able to buy these works rather than sell them. I'd like to have my own collection of art one day. It hasn't gotten to that stage where I've got a mortgage to pay and that sort of thing. But I've bought and sold things along the way pretty well, so that's been lucky. And what's interesting is that actually producing art, I've always had this thing of buying things to sell and make money on, right? And I work to make money. But with art, it's one of those weird things where I've never thought about the money aspect. I don't care if I don't make any money from it. It's more just a total, I need to do it. I don't even know why. I'm kind of a technical guy where I kind of just want to find things to solve. So for me, like, art is a big problem-solving exercise. and it's like this long journey, and I'm kind of I don't think I'll ever get to the end.
No, it feels like that, and it feels like you're very sort of innovative.
Yeah.
And you like to experiment and explore lots of different ideas. A lot of your work is steeped in research and looking at other artists and art history and that kind of thing.
But I try, my earlier stuff, if you look at it, it's kind of, I was actually interested in circuit boards. In my head, for a long time, I've been thinking, circuit boards are interesting, but they're hard to paint because they're not interesting to paint, yet they're quite interesting as objects in themselves. And it sort of nicely explains the modern age with computing and everything else. And I was also thinking how circuit boards are kind of similar to the brain and neurons and firing between neurons and neuron pathways and things like that. So all that I was thinking about, and I thought, is there a way to simplify it down in art? And so that's when I had the shingles and started off with doing those works that you'll see in my earlier stuff, which is much more, it looks a bit more like Gordon Walters style.
Yeah.
And obviously I was influenced, even without thinking too much about it, influenced by him, because that format seemed to suit it so well. I even tried to get away from looking too much like Walters by trying to run them vertically, the lines, but horizontal seemed to work always the best. So yeah, it's definitely a nod to Gordon Walters with those works.
And they're beautiful, and they have that similarity of the line, but then also instead of the koru, you're using circles more.
Correct. It's like a full bulb.
Yeah. So that is connecting to the circuit.
Correct. That's the idea. Yeah, that was always the idea. So I haven't stopped doing that series. I think the next ones though are going to look a bit more like circuitry. Not quite so simplified as those ones. So I've already got designs for those that in my mind look pretty good. So I've just got to actually put them down.
I can really see the connection now you mention it with the circuits and the neurons and the power forces. Yeah, which is really interesting. Yeah. And then you can see the Walters reference.
Correct.
I mean, have you ever had anybody saying you're copying Gordon Walters?
No, not really. I think, so Roy Good did mention something one time on a comment. I love Roy Good. I learned about him at Auckland Uni as well. And he was saying something along the lines of, it'd be good to kind of move away from a Walters reference, to move yourself forward in art, which is absolutely true. And even at the time, I didn't really see much of a Walters reference in my own head because I'm thinking circuit boards. But that's definitely true though. And so I felt like I need to go back to the drawing board a little bit and just do something that's kind of like references nothing that I've seen before. So that was actually that was good to kind of thinking that's where I really need to start focusing as well. So even though I won't stop doing that series, I like doing something completely original to my own sort of design.
It's interesting, isn't it? When you get a comment like that, it can sort of stop you in your tracks slightly.
And I went out, he invited me to his house actually, and we went and had a good chat. He showed me his amazing collection. And he's got an amazing house. And he's got such a long history in New Zealand art. He went to art school with Dick Frizzell and those sort of guys, and signed his book for me.
How amazing. It's so nice to I mean, I guess he could be, I have noticed actually that he's often commenting on your work, so he'd probably quite sort of naturally become a bit of a mentor.
I think so, he's definitely, and I really was kind of inspired by his work. Even at uni, I thought his work looked like nothing else.
I know. There's something about Roy Good that I think, I'm surprised he's not sort of more famous in a way.
I agree. Yeah, I think that day will come, a bit like Ian Scott was under the radar for so long, actually, and I think the prices will reflect that in time. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I don't know why. It's such an interesting thing, isn't it? And I have asked Roy if he'd like to be on the podcast, and he has agreed.
Great. It'd be amazing.
Yeah, he seems very generous with his ideas. He
is. I think that's what you need as an emerging type of artist. You need somebody that can give you a little bit of advice where it's warranted, but sort of help you push you on a bit by just kind of being there to even say hello.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a sort of isolating practice sometimes for an artist, that it's lovely to get somebody to actually give you feedback.
Yeah, and you don't even have to take that advice.
No.
I'm definitely, if I listened to somebody and they gave me advice I didn't agree with, I wouldn't listen to it still. I think I'm that stubborn in my own head of what I do and think that I would just still do my own thing. But sometimes when it makes sense and I agree, I'm like, actually, that's great advice.
and going back to the circuit works, what it was called, what was the actual name of that series?
Incommunicado.
Incommunicado, yeah.
And I guess I'm kind of thinking about, again, the brain and communication and that sort of thing. We don't communicate things sometimes clearly. And yeah, so that's kind of where I was going with that idea, I think.
We don't even know how to kind of figure out our thoughts in our own head, let alone sort of each other's. Yeah, I love that. No, it'll be really interesting to see where you take that series. I feel like it's just the beginning.
It's got some promise, and it's definitely, I can see where it could go. So that was just the early sort of phase of that.
Yeah, it's exciting.
And again, when you think of Ian Scott with his lattice paintings, he was also doing, you don't have to have the same theme, I don't think, the whole way through in your art. I think you can have at least two distilled themes in art in your practice, and Ian Scott was a good example of that. His models that he used to paint as well, quite different to his lattice paintings.
Yeah.
And
But he is amazing, the way he, the longevity of the lattice series.
Oh, yes.
It's incredible.
They started in the mid-70s, went right up to pretty much when he died a few years ago, yeah.
So can we go back to before this work, the Incommunicado series, and can you just talk to us about how you actually got into painting and why you decided that you wanted to be making?
Well, it really just, I think it comes back to, I can't remember when I started that series, but I feel like it was around the time that I was sick. So I've done quite a lot actually in that gap of around 2 years.
Only 2 years.
Yeah, only 2 years.
Yeah.
But however, these ideas have been in my head. And what's interesting is putting them down on canvas or panel, whatever it is. You've got these ideas in your head. You can even have a little, like a sketch or a working drawing of what you want to do in the final painting, but sometimes it doesn't work out the way you imagined it would. So I've thrown away a lot of stuff as well. And I think that's not uncommon to do for artists. So
yeah. And just speaking of that series once again, can you talk us through your process?
So a lot of those ones were actually, I had this idea of, again, being quite different about how I approach creating art. I thought maybe it'd be interesting to use sort of laser cutting in these works to get that real preciseness. Circles are one of the hardest things to paint. I know Gordon Walters used to do them by hand, but he was very good at that. It's been a long time. I don't quite have the patience for that, sitting there and also painting very thin layers, so there's no indication of a brush. I'm not even that caught up in that whole idea. Like minimalism is kind of that whole idea of not showing how something is constructed a lot of the time, but I quite like seeing or showing how things are constructed. So I don't mind brush strokes in a very austere looking kind of geometric work. It's fine by me. And so even though they were laser cut, I'd still paint them with a brush. And so I'd basically I found a laser cutter in Pakuranga who was kind of starting up, a South African guy, got quite friendly with him. So I had taken all these designs I had, and then he'd actually program them into his computer and then actually print them out or cut them out with a laser. And then I would paint the hardboard or canvas. I don't know, actually canvas actually. Paint the canvas whatever color, and then usually paint the laser cut out would be, say, black. So you've got that really nice, everything's perfect, and then I'd glue it onto the canvas. Yeah, and some of them I'd
glue it on.
Glue it on, yeah,
How
literally glue it on. So I'd actually just glue the back of the actual laser cutout that wasn't painted and then just glue it straight onto the canvas. So the canvas, for example, would be white, and then the laser cutout might be black. So you get this white and black.
Right.
If you look at them, you can kind of see how that could work.
Brilliant.
And then I'd mix up the colors. Sometimes on the canvas might be half black or say just two different colors perhaps, and then you'll have the black panel of the laser cutout going on top of that.
Wow. And what was that material? The
laser cut was usually plywood. I think usually
really
plywood,
thin.
very thin 3mm plywood.
That's beautiful. And now I look at it, I'm looking at the black one, black on black, which I love.
Yeah.
I love matte on gloss and all monochromatic. I just really love that, and I love these works actually.
Oh, thank you.
But there's just that subtle difference between the blacks.
Yeah,
and
that's
and
right.
you can actually see the sort of some shadow.
Yes,
between.
That's the other good thing about it. So I was thinking, in different times of the day, it's going to cast a shadow on the work in different ways by having that 3mm thickness, and another thing with the black on black, I was kind of playing with that idea, and I want to do more along those lines. Is Ad Reinhardt's another. I'm a big fan of his work. From that sort of New York sort of school period where he was, he would basically take these different oil paints. He'd pour terps into them, turn them upside down, and leave them upside down for about 2-3 months sometimes. But before that, he'd sort of add to each one a little bit of color, like a bit of red, a bit of blue to another one, and so you had all these different shades of black. And some would be the kind of blue black or red black, but very slight. And what that did by actually leaving them there for so long, it would separate the pigment from everything else so that you're just left with the sludgy pigment. And when he painted that on, it was just completely matte. Like there was no shine in it at all.
Wow.
And so then you would stand there looking at one of his works, and he usually have, I think, 9 different squares. And they'd all be a slightly different sort of shade of black. And so it'd take you 10 minutes sometimes to distinguish them with your eye. So that kind of idea, that ingenious kind of revolutionary kind of idea, along Cezanne with his ideas, that sort of is what draws me into sort of do what I do and make some kind of difference to something that hasn't been done before or something. I don't know.
And now that I know that you that's your process, I think I can look at those works and through a different lens, really.
Right. Yeah.
And it doesn't feel as connected to Walter's.
Yeah.
And I think in real life it would look and feel quite different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did paint some of them by hand as well. Just took a lot longer.
How would you do? I mean, you wouldn't be able to tape a circle, would you?
No, so I think I was using circle stickers of certain sizes and then sort of painting around them and then getting the opposite of that and painting inside them. So it was still using stickers to actually do it.
Yeah.
Because you can make just the very slightest mark outside of a perfect circle and it won't look right. And so, I'm not as accomplished as someone like Walter's to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, but it's just a different technique that you're using, which is just as valid.
Yeah.
And are you... I always find if I use stickers and cutouts, I often, the paint bleeds and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Have you got any tips for how to avoid that?
Yeah. So the easiest way is to do the color that's, say you're doing a white interior circle. If you get some white and paint that on the outside first, it creates a seal, and then you can paint, for example, black over that, and so you've already sealed it with that white.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So to help stop bleeding through the actual sticker. Or tape,
That's a good idea.
One thing could be done. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so it was illness that got you going, and then were you thinking at that early stage, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Yeah, it's weird. It's kind of like, even now I feel the momentum building in some weird way where I'm kind of, the ideas are more crystallized than before. Having a theme, so this upcoming exhibition I've got at the Grey Place, it's called Tension and Attitude, and I think once I had a theme in mind, I started to actually took me all the way back to that Adolf Gottschalk painting where it was he was painting something that you could see the word meaning something in the painting. So I kind of along those lines, I started to it gelled a lot better. I'm thinking, okay, well, I could, if I'm painting tension, Tension relates to many things. It can relate to the actual pressure of two objects together, but also our own lives and the stresses and tensions of everyday life. So it has this sort of weird sort of relationship as well. It's like a metaphor, for everyday kind of trials that we have.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. And did you have that in mind once you'd spoken to the Grey Place and you'd booked in a
No, it was
solo
before
show?
that. I already had that series going, and I thought that's the series I really want to start. Put into that exhibition. Yeah.
And you decided you needed to have an exhibition.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't lined up or thought about even approaching any galleries yet. It's more I'm in this sort of early phase of developing my style, which I now feel I've got more of my own style going. So yeah, I mean, in terms of would I self-market my art? Probably not, to be honest. I might end up doing that, but I feel like I just would prefer having a gallery to do all that work and I just paint. And then, I think I find that, I think my goal is really to, in my own head, and I don't know if it'll work out or not, but leave some sort of mark on art history at some level. It sounds a bit arrogant. That's kind of my, above anything to do with money and that sort of thing. I think I'm so obsessed with concepts of art that's kind of more my interest. Yeah, so I can only develop and from there.
Yeah, and I feel like you will. I mean, it just feels like it feels like I've got you at this amazing time in your sort of 50-year career, and then you'll die at 100 and become really
That's right,
famous.
At least 100, yeah. Well, medical's improving, so hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. But, it does feel like you, just from looking at your work and reading your Instagram, it just feels like you are, as you say, gaining momentum and you have a real sort of clear goal in what you want to achieve, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's right. Some people just want to paint for no real reason, or just apart from painting something they like to look at. Other people want to sell their art for commercial reasons. I'm not really interested in that kind of side of things. I guess eventually it's kind of like if your stuff does sell, it's kind of like it's to say, well, it shows that you're doing something right, I suppose. Yeah. But it's not my driving force at all. It's more just, which is nice. It's just there's no pressure that way. It's just doing what I want to do, and also not painting for how I think other people want to see things, or painting for other people. It's just painting for myself, whether people like it or not. Yeah. And
why do you feel like you need to have a show if you have that thought about not having to sell?
Because I do want to create I want to leave an impression on people. A bit like when I first saw that painting, Thrust, I like the idea of people actually being entranced by the painting. So if you look at the brushstroke works that I do, there's a lot of movement. You can see in the light. So I want to sort of get people's attention with that. And then the shapes that are within that work kind of formalize things a bit more than just pure abstract. So I like pulling things back. I like ripping tape off as well. It's something therapeutic in pulling tape off a painting.
Yeah.
I don't know why it gives, and I think it just, it gives me, so life feels a bit out of control, and it gives me some sort of control or something weird.
Yeah, or a parent of a 4 and a 6-year-old.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty wild times.
That's right.
Oh, that's so interesting. And do you feel like your kind of main goal is to find a technique that becomes the James Emery technique? Is that sort of important to you, to find something super unique? Yeah,
I want people to be able to look at something and say, well, that's by that, well, James, for example. And that's what I like to look at too. I like to look at something and think, oh, that was painted, by Pat Hanley.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely.
Having a distinctive style.
Yeah.
And then, when you've only been painting for 2 years, then, it feels like you've already made quite a lot of progress in that time developing your own style. And that's only going to grow as you keep painting.
I feel like I've got a bit of a head start in that I have had a long interest in art as well, and looking at art, and I think that helps. I think I would find it, I would struggle to actually kind of become the artist I want to be had I not done an art history degree. I think that's probably what's sort of helping me a lot to distinguish myself and where I'm going. Look, you can't sometimes look into the future without looking into the past. Yeah.
And the fact that you really notice things and look closely at art in different forms.
Yeah.
It's probably, you've got like a treasure trove of ideas from the past.
Yes, exactly. And when I look at, I look at Mondrian, for example, is one of my heroes as well, and how he started out more as a figurative painter in the early days, and was painting trees and windmills in Holland and things like that. And then in the 1920s, he's painting these very different looking abstract pieces that are, well, what he said, I think, was that those are the vertical and horizontal tree trunks and branches that he formalized into those black squares filled with colors, which are primary colors, the colors of light. So a lot of my work is actually based on that idea of Mondrian's, of just simple sort of primary colors a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I quite like just using primary colors mostly.
And black.
And black and white, yeah.
And white, yeah. And just looking at some of your other works before we start talking about your latest collection.
Sure.
You have done some work that feels quite colour-filled to
Right.
me. And, you've got some panels that have got a lot of movement and then others that are very flat.
Yeah.
You're experimenting.
It actually worked out quite good, that one.
Yeah, I love that one. So that's acrylic on canvas.
I should do more like that too. It's where I had quite a thin wash of blue, and it going over the red, it creates like a purple sort of color. So you're getting the colors sort of mixing, but you can still see the pattern over the red, which I quite liked. It worked out quite good. Yeah,
it's really beautiful, and it's very geometric.
Yes,
but it's also has a landscape feel about it.
Yeah, I didn't even think of anything like that. But funny you say that, because I sometimes think of after the fact, and I think, it's a bit like a landscape or something. Not at the time though.
Yeah.
A lot of that is kind of experimenting along the way to where I'm at now, and so now is about, I guess, more of those brushstroke works. Yeah.
Yeah, and can you describe those to our lovely listeners?
Yeah, so the brushstroke works is like an all-over brushstroke is what I'm sort of going for at the moment, where I make my own brushes so they're big enough to actually cover the whole canvas, and I'll do all these different sweeps across the canvas, and it leaves these brushstroke details, and in the light they're quite reflective, and a lot of them are black, because black is the most reflective. Well, it's not a color. I was going to say color. It's like the absence of color. But it is the most reflective, and you can see a lot of white and black. I was just playing around one day with a paintbrush and thinking, if I could take this thick paint, and I quite like the idea of seeing the mark of the painter. So I thought if I create brushstrokes, that might be interesting. And then I thought, what about an all-over brushstroke? That'd be even more interesting.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I went with that. But I also love geometric sort of abstraction. So I wanted to still incorporate that with it. So I thought in the early days of all these sketches I did of applying shapes to these brushstrokes, which again in the light look very 3D. And then I thought, I'm also drawn by mid-century design, some 1950s sort of modern design, and a lot of those shapes are kind of more organic. They're not square. They can be a bit more sort of, I don't know if you think of kind of space in the 1950s and how things, even utilitarian dinnerware was kind of more of a kidney shape, for example, things like that.
Yeah.
So a lot of the shapes are actually, I use the black brush strokes to actually be the main focus of of the art and painting around them, so that they become like the shapes. The black becomes the shape. If you know what I mean.
And then it has that lovely contrast between the sort of movement from the brush strokes and then quite a flat painted part.
Exactly. So where you apply the colours, those colours in particular don't really reflect as well as the black does. So that allows the black to really come forward and become more three-dimensional.
It's so beautiful. The one I'm looking at now is white on green on red, which you made last year.
Right.
Which I love.
Oh, yeah, right, that one, yes. Yeah.
And I love the way you've got a white and a red rectangle in each opposite corner, but also, painting the side of the canvas red. Creating another rectangle, but sort of on the side. That's very unique.
Yeah, thank you. I like the idea of going beyond the surface, because in such a small area, it's sort of why I feel like it's too confining. I want to sort of approach it like it goes beyond the canvas or beyond the board in that case. So I'll paint kind of like angles of squares as if it's part of a bigger square.
I can see that. And the effect of those brush strokes, like you said, is so reflective. Like when you move around it, the whole thing changes.
Absolutely, yeah.
And becomes quite sort of 3D.
So again, they have to be seen in person, really. That's, again, why I need to do an exhibition, because you can't just photograph them that easily.
Yeah, and it's quite good. Some of your Instagram posts are videos of you moving around the work, which is really effective. Yeah.
Helps a bit, yeah.
And the work, I mean, to me, it almost references New Zealand in a way, just because it feels almost like corrugated iron.
Yes, I realised that after I did some of those. I thought, geez, it's like corrugated iron. So, yeah, it's interesting. And then I also was thinking about the mud pools in Rotorua as well.
Yeah.
I was thinking, geez, it's kind of like those mud pools. And
totally.
I should do something that looks similar to that or something. I don't know.
Or you could make them really quite sort of natural and organic colours.
Exactly, yeah.
And also a bit like sort of record vinyl,
Vinyl record, yeah.
Yeah, there's a feel of that as well with the lines.
Yes.
And how do you make these brushes?
So it's really using these long brushes, which I found wallpaper brushes for applying glue to wallpaper at the moment is what I seem to be using. And then I kind of join those together, 2 to 3, depending on how wide the canvas is. And they can get quite long because even though you've got even not a huge canvas, you kind of got to have quite a bit of movement, and you can't get to the end of the brush. It's all got to be within the brush length.
And they're quite coarse bristles. Yeah,
that's right. The coarser the better, really. So they're kind of stiffer nylon bristles. And my father's he's a house painter. And so he used to do wallpapering, and I used to help him in the school holidays and as a job. And so I kind of got quite familiar with how to apply paint and water it down and thin it down, that sort of thing. So I got quite used to dealing with paint at a younger age too. So that was quite handy.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that's it's almost like a nod to your dad in a way.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah, that's right.
Which is really nice.
Yeah. So it's been helpful just to really feel comfortable with using paint.
Yeah. And how do you actually, what's your process? Do you lay the paint down and while it's wet, move the brush through it, or how do you make it?
I tend
Not too many trade secrets. Somebody might.
Yeah, I know. This is the thing.
Yeah, just whatever you're comfortable sharing.
I use a fairly thick, the thickest paint I can find, so a heavy-bodied paint, and I tend to use acrylic most of the time, and it's great to work with. It has a very high shine naturally when it dries. The only downside with it is it's a very limited time to work with it. Even if you apply it thick, especially in summer, it just really dries within about 10 minutes. It becomes much harder to use in a few minutes. So I find I've got about 10 different swipes across the canvas before it gets too difficult to use. And so it's a lot of pressure actually to do it in a short amount of time. I tried using oil paint, but the time to dry with that, it just takes so long, especially as it's quite thick. And using kind of resins and alkyds to sort of dry it faster with oil, it leaves it kind of more of a dull state. so you don't have this high shine that you would if it's naturally out of the tube. So at the moment, I'm still playing with that idea to get that right, but for the moment, it's mostly acrylic, and sometimes I'll even varnish it with a gloss varnish after that, or sometimes I'll just leave it as it is. So it's always risky using varnishes because they have to be spray varnishes for that type of work, and you don't want to have patches, especially being glossy.
Yeah.
So if I don't have to varnish it, I won't. It just depends on each work, really.
If you get the gloss you're seeking.
Yeah, and the brush strokes themselves actually come out differently depending on not only how much you've used, how thick it is, but then also how long you've been working with it. As it gets drier, you start to get finer brush strokes, which actually looks quite good. But if you leave it too long, it starts to get, being this plasticky sort of acrylic, it starts to just get sort of too difficult to actually save.
Yeah, I
so
can
then
imagine.
you've got to throw it away and start again. And
Yeah.
it gets expensive because the paint itself is expensive, being that thick.
And you're using a lot.
So, I'll just pile it onto the canvas or the board, just with a, maybe almost like a putty knife or something like that. And then just sort of try and even it out with the brush and go from there. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And do you do like Gretchen Albrecht does with put your canvas on the floor and get down there with your big brush?
Not on the floor, but on a table. So I've never worked on the wall, although I don't see why that wouldn't be a problem. I just need to secure it to the wall to give it a go.
Yeah.
Maybe, and then have some plastic behind there so it's nice and clean. and maybe I think that could actually work well with the brush type work.
Yeah.
I've seen her actually on the floor. I think I remember using kind of paint mate or one of those sort of brush kind of things.
She uses brooms
and things, all that sort of stuff.
And sometimes she was talking in this podcast about using, making bridges so she can get to the middle of the canvas when she does a really big canvas. Yeah. And do you feel like you might start experimenting with scale?
Yeah, I'd love to, but storage is an issue.
Yeah.
So when I'm more comfortable, I think I would. I mean, I think that's more something I would do with oil paint when I've got a few hours to work with it rather than a few minutes. It'd be too hard otherwise, unless you broke it up into different shapes and doing it at different times. Because I was thinking about Gretchen Albrecht's doing, and I know that she likes the ovals more than like a round shape.
Yeah, she doesn't like circles.
No, she doesn't like circles because there's a hardness to that shape, and ovals are a much more, softer kind of shape, which makes sense. Yeah.
And you haven't really gone into circles.
No, not to say I won't, but I kind of take that idea a little bit too, that if I can do ovals instead, I'd probably rather do those.
Yeah. And it's just such a beautiful contrast, and it's like a contrast and then a sort of balance. I guess that's where you sort of ended up thinking about tension. It feels like there's also tension within the work of that sort of the movement and then the stillness and the flatness and the texture and using the brush strokes through colours like your white on or teal on red, I think it was.
Right.
Teal on red, yeah. That's also really interesting, the way you're dragging through basically two colours, I guess.
Oh, yeah, right. So that was an experimental piece. So that was actually using gel, like high gloss gel that I actually coloured. And because I wanted to create that glossiness, and I thought if I try the gel kind of medium, I'll get the thickness of that. So it's like a heavy gel paste, and I mixed color into it. So because it's so clear, it shows any color really well. So I mixed the teal with red together, and that was quite difficult to make that work actually. So I need to do more work on that, but it worked out okay, I guess, for that one. But they are hard to do. Yeah. Mixing colors is quite interesting though.
Yeah, and it's quite cool the way it has different sort of degrees of the red or of the blue. It varies quite a bit too, which adds another element, I guess.
Yeah, I've done one recently actually, which I haven't photographed or put on Instagram, which is using black but also cobalt blue, heavy-bodied acrylics and mixing them together and getting sort of the accents of the blue coming through looks quite good as well. Yeah.
Beautiful work. I really love it.
Thanks.
So you are introducing your amazing work through the Grey Place, which is in Grey Lynn in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland.
Yes.
And that show, which is Tension and Attitude, that starts next Tuesday, so that's the 26th of March,
Yes.
5 p.m. opening, which I hope to get to.
Great.
And that goes on for 2 weeks. So
Yes.
can you tell us a little bit about the works that are in the show and the ideas behind them?
Yeah, so the tension side of things, that is, I think we already discussed a bit about that, where it's a bit of a metaphor for kind of everyday kind of strains and stresses of life, and you have particular points in the day or the week that are worse than others, or more tension and stress than others, so that's where you get that pressure point. It also relates to two objects, sort of one pushing down from the top on the bottom, I guess, in my own head, thinking about that as well. And then you've got the other works, which are the attitude works. I think there's about 3 in the show, and that actually relates to me. I actually studied to be a pilot, like private pilot's lessons, years ago, maybe 10 plus years ago, just for a hobby. And I got to the point of being able to take off and land, but then I kind of ran out of money and didn't want to spend any more money on that because it got too expensive. But I got to that point and it was quite fun doing those lessons. And I was just thinking more recently about some of the gauges, and I was thinking about that attitude gauge. And the attitude gauge is kind of, it basically tells you where you are in terms of the horizon, where your wings are. And so I started to think as well, it's funny how you kind of go through life with this sort of set kind of destination sometimes in your head of where you want to go, but you get off track so many times. And so I guess it relates to that in my own mind. And so it is a bit more of a figurative kind of series, that one, obviously, because it's actually, I'm thinking of this gauge and thinking of the horizon and the sky and the land together. And so it impacted me just thinking about that and thinking I've got to get that down to some art.
Totally. And I can really see that.
There's unlimited angles you can use as well. So.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah.
And the horizon, it's kind of, you can see it through whatever point of view you approach it, I guess. Yeah. And I love the one that has the black at the bottom with the movement, and then it's very the grey and white, or the black and white. It's very sky-like, isn't it? And sort of cloudy and soft, it feels, and contrasts beautifully with the hardness of the black.
That was an experiment in using spray paint. So that was just really, it was all black, and it was all acrylic black, and then the bottom part I actually just used a brush and was trying oil paint. So that's actually oil on the bottom, those brush strokes, and beautifully reflective. Being oil, it just takes a lot longer to dry, so I did that one quite a while ago. And then I used just acrylic spray paint over the top in white to get that sort of grey but it was actually black and then white on top of that, creating that sort of mottled effect.
Yeah. That's really striking, and that's going to be at the show, isn't it?
Yes.
That one. Yeah, and as I think it was Gretchen was talking about, seeing actual artworks in person is just so much richer, because you get that sense of scale and texture so much more. And I think particularly with these works, it's really important to actually be there and move around the work.
Yeah, absolutely.
To see the effect.
Yeah. I mean, some works are just... I'm thinking of Elliot Love's work actually too, because his looks just so much better in person. Even though it looks amazing on photographs, you can't get the full scale of everything, and the colours and the perfection of it until you're actually in front of it. Some works need to be seen.
Yeah, totally. I'm looking forward to that show.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking about also how artists can kind of choose to whether they want to describe their art and what it means to them and the meanings it has for them. Some artists don't want to talk about that, and that's interesting. I find that kind of discussion, and like Ralph Hotry for a long time wouldn't discuss the meanings of his works, and they're very abstract, and yet sometimes I feel like it was a shame he didn't describe even to his friends more about what he was painting. And I was watching a documentary on him a while back, and this is in the 70s, and it was somebody that he had given a piece of art to, a friend of his, who maybe a collaboration, because he did a lot of collaborations with different poets and things like that. And it was this painting with lots of numbers on it, and his older brother had died in Italy in World War II, and I think Ralph was 9 or 10 at the time. And anyway, these numbered paintings called Sangro, I think it was on the Sangro River, his brother got killed, and these Sangro paintings are all numbers and have these scenes on them, sort of fiery scenes in black and with white numbers. And he gave one to a friend, and his friend was actually on camera, and this is back in the 70s, and saying, "Oh, I got this painting from Ralph Hotry. I don't know what the heck it's about. It's like all these numbers on it. It's like, it's really weird, but, I'll keep it, It's such a, such an important piece to make for Ralph. Has such significance. It's a shame that that person didn't know what the actual meaning behind that work was. And so, I guess, I can see how people don't want to describe what they're painting, and sometimes it's for the viewer to kind of work out what paintings mean in their own mind, which makes sense as well. But in some cases, it's nice to describe what things mean. That's why I was sort of going to where I got the idea for things like attitude. It's just my own thoughts on things, but to other people might see something completely different, which is great too. So
yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
And how do you actually communicate what you're thinking with your work?
Through the title, I guess. I think titles are quite important. I don't like the idea of just throwing a title on something for no real reason. I think it's got to have some significance to that work. Titles of paintings are quite important because you're basically laying down what that painting means to you. So I would probably rather have it untitled than something that I didn't really fully back, I guess. But I quite like describing colours that are on, red on black on blue, for example. I find that quite interesting.
Yeah.
Because that creation process of the order of something you've put down.
And sometimes with work like yours, it is very it's also quite process driven, isn't it? So sometimes it might not be a narrative, or it might not be a particular message you're trying to get across. It's celebrating the actual paint or the process.
Yeah.
Which is great in itself.
Exactly, yeah. Why not?
Totally.
Yeah.
Let's get on to our final 4 questions. What would you say to your younger artistic self?
So I think it's interesting because hindsight is always a wonderful thing. You can look back and think, geez, if I only had done this or that, I wouldn't have made too many changes, I don't think, because it wouldn't have got me to where I am now. And I think life is about learning, and that's why we're really here. And so we're meant to take some hard knocks and some along the way. And so I don't know if I could change too many things, I might not be who I am now, and I might not be making art.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of
right.
thing I think about, I suppose. Whereas before I would have said, I would have done this or I would have done that. But whatever I did got me to where I am now, so I can't really argue with that.
No, so true.
For better or for worse.
Yeah. And you have mentioned a few of your favourite artists, but are there any more you'd like to add?
So I think in terms of my style of what I do, I think one of the artists that also influences me in the idea of the black being the most reflective kind of paint is Pierre Soulages, French artist, and he's from kind of the 40s, 50s period. And so he started just applying kind of black paint with scrapers and things and scraping it off and quite thick as well. And he calls it black and light, which is a very true sort of thing to say about black, because you don't realize even when he first started working with it, he came to realize just how reflective that color is, and it reflects all this white that you just don't get that reflection with other colors, and that's why I use black a lot. It's just that reflective quality. So even though I don't think he used too many brush strokes as much as kind of just chisels and tools like that to create his works, it's still been quite an influence on just that fact alone has been very helpful to think about. Yeah.
And then all the other amazing people like Cézanne and...
No, Cézanne, yeah. So another one of my early favourites, and I think anyone that does this revolutionary work like that but is not taken seriously at the time is quite captivating, that story. So, for example, his still lifes where he has these different points of view, so there's different perspectives you'd see depending on where you sit of things. And so he obviously thought, why can't I put all those different perspectives in one actual painting on one surface together? So it makes it very interesting. At the time, they would have thought he's loony.
Yeah.
But it's these revolutionary, ingenious ideas. The other, I remember seeing one of his landscapes actually in Sydney Art Gallery, and it was quite emotional thinking about all the hardships he had growing up through the arts. I mean, his father was quite wealthy, and he used to send him some money along the way, but he really didn't want to conform to any kind of traditional kind of work that his father would have liked him to have done. So he just pushed on with his art and wasn't taken seriously by the art world as well. So, and he had one or two people that were really interested in anything he did along the way that supported him. And so when you see a landscape like that, and in that landscape, his idea was, let's take perspective and flatten it out into a two-dimensional image by incorporating color from, say, blue in the sky into a bit of blue in the trees. So pulling those two colors together creates that two-dimensional kind of effect. So another kind of ingenious idea at the time, which no one else is probably doing. And so I like that kind of technicality of painting. I find that quite inspiring, yeah. And Gretchen Albrecht is another one too,
yes,
as we've discussed.
Yeah. Love her.
Yeah.
And what would you say, I think I also know the answer to this question, but what is one of the biggest challenges for you as a practicing artist?
Time. That's about it, really. Time, because I've got all these great ideas, things to do. I need more hours in the day, but I have to sleep at some point.
You have to be a dad.
To be a dad, have to go to work. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly
Realities
right.
of life.
I end up, that's one thing I do. I come home from work and I cook the dinner, and so that seems to be a good process at the moment. My partner will look after the kids, and then I'll look after them after that some of the time, and read them.
Can you see yourself ever having a full-time practice?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. If I can automate my full-time job at the moment, which I'm aiming to get that more automated, streamlined, that will open up more time to do a lot more art. So yeah, definitely.
Great, exciting. Yeah. And why do you make the kind of work that you make?
I think, as we've also discussed, it's kind of this idea of kind of just creating something unique and a piece of myself in that art. There's also this kind of weird idea I have that when I eventually leave the planet, it's enduring. It kind of, it's at least somebody's possibly got it somewhere. So you're not completely gone. There's remnants of you somewhere on, apart from your kids.
Yeah.
There's that weird idea I have in my head too. Yeah. And I think when you think of all these old artists that are so ancient now in historical terms, so far back, it's amazing to think that their legacy still lives on. So some of that in there maybe.
And I think art is such a beautiful legacy, as when you do die, and that your children can have your work that you have made with your
Yeah.
hands.
Yeah.
And I feel
I
like
think
that
so
with my grandmother's work.
Yeah.
It's the older I get, the more I treasure it.
Yeah.
Because it's so much a part of her, and it's the only thing I have really of her, that is really personal
Yeah, exactly.
to her. And it's nice to be able to do that for your children and then for their children. And
Yeah. That's right.
It's a pretty important thing, which is quite a privilege to have, really.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we have to finish talking. It's been such a lovely time with you today,
Yeah, it's been
James.
great. Thank you. It's been amazing.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. And,
It's got me thinking.
well, that's good. It's got me thinking too. It's got me actually quite motivated to
Yeah.
start painting again, which I haven't done for a bit.
You should.
So-
Your works are amazing.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. I need to start putting some time aside, more time for my practice. But I do feel like you are going to go places, and I feel like you've got this wealth of ideas that
Yeah,
is going
that's right.
to come to fruition, and
Lots of
you're
ideas.
you're
Yeah.
that kind of guy who's just going to make stuff happen.
Thank you.
And I really look forward
I hope so.
to following your journey.
Great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Yeah.